Good day, everyone. Welcome to Faith Seeking Understanding. I am Allan, your host. I am a pastor, retired, a professor, a theologian in exile, a peddler of hope, and I am the self-appointed Anselm of Canterbury Chair of Podcast Theology and Culture at Faith Seeking Understanding University, a completely fabricated institution of higher learning, but where all seekers are invited to ponder profound things. And I have as my conversation partner, as always, uh, who has the fabricated endowed chair, the grand poobah chair of podcast of theology of try it again, economics and public theology.
There we go.
I made up the title so I can just keep changing it, I guess.
Right.
Here at Faith Seeking Understanding, Michael. Uh, the
Well, at least you
Royals are
can't
the
count my
Royals
favorite.
are killing me, Cruz.
Yeah. Oh, Lord. It's
Oh
just been
my.
awful. It's been
Oh
awful.
my.
And part of it's the expectations at the beginning of the year. I think
Yeah.
was that we were going to have an above 500 team,
Yeah.
and we still possibly could. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's
I
been. And we've lost Cole Reagans for the rest of this year and maybe next
yeah.
uh, with elbow surgery, and
Oh
just
boy.
it's ugly.
I heard a pastor friend of mine many years ago was talking about a staff member that he had who wasn't working out, and his comment was, and I've never forgot it, he said that she had reached the highest level of her mediocrity.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
right.
sometimes that's what we do, right?
Yes,
Well, my
exactly.
guards are hanging in there. I mean, their
Yeah, they
offense is
are.
hit and miss. We lost Jose Ramirez for a
Yeah.
while,
Yeah.
but we got one out of the White Sox last night. But the first two, they cleaned our clocks. So I don't know. We'll see about that. Hey, quick World Cup.
Yeah.
You got the World Cup out there where you are in Kansas City. You've been
We
going to
do.
some matches. You're going to one tonight. How's that going for you?
That has been so much fun. It's been so energizing and seeing people gathering together around, just having fun. I've gone to the Fan Fest, which is in walking distance of my house, and it's an international fun fest. People
Yeah.
just going and having a good time, and everybody's your best friend, and even if you're supporting opposing teams.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, this has
Yep.
been a great uh, time for our community,
Yeah.
and just really enjoying it. I'm going to the game tonight. It's supposed to be raining through the whole evening.
Okay.
So this is going to be fun. We've got our ponchos and our hats ready and
So they
everything.
play in the rain?
Pretty much, I think if there's lightning, they have to
Yeah.
suspend the game. But
Right.
yeah, they're talking about moderate to light rain just kind
Okay.
of going on through all the way through the night till like 5 o'clock in the morning. So
Okay.
there's not going to be just like a thunderstorm, let it blow over and continue play.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think they're going to be playing in the rain.
Okay. Very good. Playing in the rain. There's a song there somewhere. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well, today our conversation is America at 250 Promises and Problems.
Yes.
So we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States. Um, I remember, and I'm sure you do too, I remember the bicentennial
Right.
in 1976. I was 14 years old. And I remember watching the TV. I remember watching Peter Jennings, a great journalist, uh, narrating all the festivities. I remember all the boats in New York Harbor, Boston Harbor, the wooden ships, and all
Yeah.
of this stuff. And I just remember that. And I just remember it was quite a time for people to celebrate.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think we have that same feeling for the 250th. Now, it could be the circles I run in.
Yeah.
I'm not saying people don't want to celebrate it or observe it,
Right.
but we just don't. Well, somebody has been very successful in making it about him.
Yeah. Right.
Even for those of us who know it's not, still we have to respond. And of course, I'm talking about our current president who thinks everything's about him, right? We know
Yes. Right. Yeah.
that. And I just don't think. we're as excited as we were back 200 back on the 200th.
Yeah.
And I'd respond to that. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think that's true. I also do remember, yes, we did a lot more to celebrate things, but one of my memories from that I've carried with me from that time is that I thought even the 200th anniversary celebration was a bit muted. And I think that came from the fact that just a year and a half earlier, we'd had a president resign from office.
Yeah.
The economy was in difficult straits in the late 1970s.
Yep.
You hadn't had the takeover of the embassy in Iran until a couple of years later, but there were already deteriorating signs in terms of military conflicts. There were still a lot of issues around race in terms of violence and disturbances happening. So it was not a all feel good.
Yeah.
Uh, we all feel good about ourselves moment 200 for the 200th anniversary either. Um, so I think a piece of that is probably comes with the package of these
Yeah.
celebrations of our key milestones. That it's always a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Looking at ourselves and looking at our history, and always will be.
Well,
So I
and that's a great
part
way. That's a great way to talk about the promises and the problems, right?
right,
You,
right,
and, uh, one of the things about telling the story of history is, first of all, the telling of history is always selective because
right.
we can't tell the whole thing. Even somebody who writes a 3-volume history of the United States is going to leave something out.
Sure.
We have to pick and choose what we think tells the story, the events and happenings tell the story most completely. So it's selective. The problem is we often want to tell the story selectively because we have an agenda.
Right.
Sorry about that, Michael. I've got a frog in my throat.
No problem.
Um, and one of the problems we're having right now is what's rearing its head again is the telling of American history selectively to either, if not completely white out, pun
Yeah,
intended on the color there, if
exactly.
not completely white out, at least mute
Right,
the unsavory aspects of our history.
right,
And so we have to tell the story of history
right,
with its good stuff, and there's good stuff there, and also the bad stuff.
right,
So it is always a mixed bag.
right.
Um, I want to talk about the promises first and then the problems.
Yeah,
Good news first, then the bad news.
yeah,
So, um, this idea of freedom for all, that all, as the Declaration of Independence says, all men are created equal.
hmm,
That is a aspirational statement. Is the way One of the ways that I see it is that
absolutely. Yeah,
when it was written, it really referred to white men and more specifically white men who were landowners.
yes, right,
uh, and and depending on what colony you were from, maybe white men were landowners who were a certain Christian denomination.
right,
But there's kind of something aspirational about it that, and this has been the struggle. All men are created equal, and then we had to really struggle through living up to that and expanding the idea that it's not just all white men who are created equal, that it's all men of all color, whether they own property or not. It includes women, obviously.
right,
Those things had to be fought for. They were not just, somebody said, "Hey, that's a great idea. Let's just do it."
right.
But it's aspirational. And I think Martin Luther King, that was his message to us.
Hmm.
You have this document that says all men are created equal, but it's really not true in
Right,
practice.
right.
So live up to your ideals. I think that's what King was trying to do.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so anyway, well, let's start with that. So the idea of equality and fighting for it, and you've got your Martin Luther King Cup there.
yeah, that's right. I think
Wow.
he had, I think he had the best analogies that I've heard, which is that the Declaration of Independence was a promissory note. And
Yes.
when Black Americans came to place a check, it came back insufficient funds.
Yeah.
And that is the continual struggle of the United States is to
Yeah.
live up to those high ideals that it set in its founding documents.
Yeah.
And I think that as we look forward, the positive thing is that we stated those ideals. And I've often set and talked about uh, when we do the national anthem or involved in singing patriotic songs, I frequently have this interrogation of myself. What am I celebrating here? What are we celebrating? Am I celebrating America as it is today? Yeah, some parts of it, but
Yeah.
no, that's not fully what it's about. What I'm celebrating is the aspiration
Yeah.
of what America said that it wants to be, and that my commitment to that cause and to that reality of creating those things to really live out fully those ideas
Yeah.
that we set forward. So that's what I think of when I do the national anthem or sing
Yeah.
patriotic songs and involved in patriotic events. So yeah, it's incomplete. It's imperfect. Um,
Yeah. You know, and as you say that, I think of the preamble to the Constitution, and I had to memorize that in school. I don't know if you did, but I had to
yeah,
memorize that in school, and I still can say it.
yeah,
But we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, and I understand those persons who say we, the people, is the most important part of the
yeah,
preamble. I
right.
think it's the next phrase.
Yes,
In
exactly.
order to form a more
Or
perfect union,
union.
they knew it wasn't a perfect union.
They didn't
What
say
we,
in order to form the perfect union, in order to form
yeah,
a more perfect union.
a
Yes.
more perfect union. In other
Yeah.
words, it's a work in progress,
Yeah.
and we want to strive to make it more perfect. And I think that's what you see
Right.
in the move to end slavery, which unfortunately cost hundreds of thousands, I don't know how many thousands of lives in the Civil War.
Right.
We see that in getting women the right to vote, which caused a lot of consternation and protesting and all other kinds of things. And also the issue with indigenous folks. I mean,
Yeah.
the things that they have endured and continue to endure. But the idea was we're moving toward a more perfect union where all are viewed as equal, treated equally under the law. People are not treated equally under the law
No,
today.
they're not.
Uh, and so the idea is that it's a work in progress, which is why, you know, when someone wants to mute criticism by saying nonsensical stuff like America, love it or leave it, or
Yeah. Right.
my country, right, no matter what, this kind of nonsense,
Right.
is that they're not in step with what even the founders wanted to do, that they wanted
Right.
to work towards something better. And Benjamin Franklin says it's not a perfect document, right? He says
Right.
very clearly, it's not a perfect document. When the Constitution is 1787 is when the Constitutional Convention happens. Thomas Jefferson is off in France being a delegate. He
Right.
he reads it and there's stuff he doesn't like.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
But
Yeah.
the idea is you're forming a more perfect union. And the one thing that concerns me is that we currently are in a time, we've always been in this time, but
Right.
there are moments in history where events come together that make it more pronounced. And that is we are in a time where we have people who think the union is fine just like it is,
Right.
and that we need to oppose people who are working to make it what I would, from my perspective, more perfect.
Yes. Right. Yeah. And I think that that's the challenge is that the documents that we have are the starting point. They are not the finish line,
Right.
um, and there is no finish line because this is always going to be a work in progress. And even if we had the perfect document to create what we're talking about, we still have human beings involved,
Yeah.
and there is sin, there is frailties, there are limitations that human beings have that is always going to make society messy.
Yeah.
And I think there are times, Ecclesiastes says there's a time to build up and a time to tear down. And we go through cycles of that. And I think that there are periods in our history where there's more consensus, where things seem to hum along more smoothly. But there are always going to be followed by times of disarray, of confusion, of conflict, and that those always come. And if you look over the 250 years that we've been around, you see cycles of that.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Multiple cycles of that. So on the one hand, I think it's wrong to think that everything is okay like it is and doesn't need any further reform because we've already figured this out and we designed it hundreds of years ago, and so we don't need to change anything. Everything's fine. I think that is inappropriate. I also think it's inappropriate because we are in these difficult times, and these are, I think, some of the worst times we've been in probably since World War II.
Yeah.
That that these are terrible times. That therefore everything is lost, and the whole experiment has failed, and this is the end. And this declinism and pessimism that there can't be a positive future. I think that's wrong as well too.
Yeah.
Um, so. It's always been a tension, always been a balance of trying to find ways to move forward to create a more perfect union as we go along, and that's the call to each of us down through the ages, and it's the call to us going forward. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. I do think that human beings innately desire freedom. This is my own theology here, but I
right,
think God builds freedom into the universe. I mean, I think it's clear from what we know about the evolution of the universe and even biological evolution is that God gives the universe even freedom to make itself. I think that there is freedom built into the universe, and I think therefore people just want to be free.
right,
Meaning we just want to do, and I know we've got an double-edged sword here because often the Bible says it's our freedom, we use it for terrible things,
right,
but there is the idea that we want freedom. The problem I think at the moment is that I think we are witnessing people who have an understanding of freedom, their freedom, that means they need to deny it to others.
yeah,
Now, I know they wouldn't say it that way, and I
right,
know they would deny that, but
right,
I think functionally that's what's going on. So, but I want to say that in a truly free society,
right,
it can't be freedom for me, but not you,
right,
right?
right. Yeah,
It's got to
exactly.
be, and so freedom is about others. Freedom is about, so if I'm only focused on my freedom and what I want, I'm missing the point here
Yeah,
of what this experiment, this American experiment, whatever we want to call it,
yeah,
was about. That it's freedom for others, and I am not. I'm as only as free as you are, to be honest.
right. Yeah, and particularly for Christians, I think the idea that God created humanity, as you talk about in Genesis, and God created humanity in God's image.
Yeah,
The idea there, what does it mean to be in God's image? And the without going into all sorts of rabbit trails here, the very idea that somehow we are God's agents in the world to act and work with the mind of God in the work that we do. So we have to understand who God is, what God's will is, and then we each in our own specific spheres and the places that we're doing them, we use that freedom to be creative, to create great things, to bring creation to its fullness, to work in that environment, whether it's in our work life, our families, our communities. That freedom is what creates flourishing. And that's not just freedom for Americans, that's freedom for all humanity. The Bible
exactly.
isn't specific to nationalities. And yes, there are limitations in terms of what we can do, and there's human frailties and there's sin. And so, therefore, there have to be barriers and restrictions. We have to navigate disagreements. Every culture has to figure out how it navigates different uh, disagreements and different values. And so, yes, there's always going to be conflict, there's going to be difficulties, but the vision, as Christians at least, should be this idea towards freedom and people being creative and welcoming each other and appreciating the other people with different capabilities, different experiences, different contexts are also contributing to the greater humanity, just as we are.
Yeah.
So that to me just seems to be one of the most core Christian perspectives. For God so loved the world that he
Yeah.
gave his only son, not that he loved a particular nation or a particular group. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. The world in Jesus, the world is now favored. And again, to say, I'm sorry, there's nothing in the story of Scripture, there's nothing in the story of Jesus that would lead anyone today to say God has favored a particular people or God has favored a particular nation. That is not the way God works after
Yeah.
Jesus. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
God loves everyone in all the nations, and he just doesn't do this anymore. My Old Testament scholar friend Dan Hawk would say that God went with the nation of Israel and went with a kingdom in the world, and it didn't work out so well.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
And God said, "Okay, all right, one and done on that."
Yeah.
And
Right.
so then Jesus comes and expands it. He expands
Right.
it, and so this idea that somehow the song America the Beautiful, God shed his grace on thee. Well, perhaps so, but God sheds God's
On everyone.
grace on Canada
Yeah.
and Germany, and if I may say so, Iran,
Yes.
and China. That God, this is God. God's grace is this all encompassing. So when we decide there's something special, divinely special about us as a country,
Right.
to be honest, that to me is a betrayal of the gospel. It's just a
Right.
betrayal,
Yeah.
because it tribalizes the gospel, and
Right.
that's what the gospel is not about.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Well, and I think one of the most helpful diagrams I've ever seen, I think, was by the theologian Christopher Wright, where he takes a triangle and he puts at the top of the triangle, he puts God, and at one side he puts Israel, and the other side he puts Palestine, the land of Israel.
yeah,
And so he says the Old Testament, those were the three pieces of the triangle that the message is about. He said in the New Testament, and he changes the image, he draws a bigger triangle and sets that triangle inside it with the top touching where God's still at the top. But instead of Israel, it's all humanity. And
yeah,
instead of Palestine, it's all the earth. And
yeah,
the New Testament takes that triangle, which is God's plan initially anyway, takes that triangle and expands it to fill the whole triangle. That
exactly.
that's the message of Scripture. That imagery, that diagram has always stuck
Yeah,
with me as
that's
a
a good image. Christopher Wright's just a great scholar. So
yeah,
anything he says deserves to be entertained.
yeah.
So here we are. We're at the 250th, and we do aspire for a more perfect union. So let me put you on the spot here.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to see to make America a more perfect union?
Well, I mean, so you could talk about specific policies. I think,
However you want to answer the question.
yeah, I think at the core is the idea of human dignity and rule of law. Excuse me, rule of law, that we live by the rule of law, and I think that's probably the single most important thing being challenged right now. Is,
Yeah,
are we going to live by laws that constrain the behavior of, people and constrain the government, or are we going to be a country that lives under authoritarian rule that is primarily driven by the whims of an individual or a group of individuals, whether it's a individual president who's trying to seize that power or a small oligarchy that is trying to run the country? Um, to me, the idea of an authoritarian and a oligarchy running the country run counter to the principles that we just talked about in terms of human freedom, of
yeah,
people participating in their lives. And so, as both as a Christian and then clearly as an American, in looking at our Constitution and our history, those two dovetail well together.
yeah,
The idea that if we were to live out the full promise of the idea that all people are created equal and that all people deserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that we'd be pursuing that.
Yeah.
So, as I see right now, first one is having a president and a government that is accountable.
Yeah.
I think that that is the first thing. And then also holding some large corporations that are attempting to distort our economy, distort freedom. There's always going to be an element of that. There's no
Yeah.
way that you perfectly escape that. But the wheel turns, it swings and pendulums back and forth, and it swung too far one direction. So I think policies that will restrain that are what we need. Here's the interesting piece to me. Um, so we're looking at the times we're living in right now and how much it feels like things are dissolving and falling apart. That
Yeah.
that we're losing a whole bunch of things. But I think that a lot of what we had prior to the current president, going back before 2016 and going on back, much of that was just sort of carried on inertia and just
Yeah.
sort of common cultural agreement about what we agreed to and was
Yeah.
not um, codified or made explicit about the agreements we've had. And Trump has taken advantage of that to try to upend all sorts of things that we've had in our culture and in our government, things that were just done by custom and
Right.
sense of decency. He has tried to upend those.
Right.
So we think, okay, so that's an inevitable, irreversible descent into chaos that we never recover from. I think the real possibility is that his what he has done then creates a counter movement
Right.
that begins to make more explicit, that will begin to codify things we probably should have codified in the past, but because we were willing to operate on gentlemen's agreements about things, we codify those in
Right.
the future that makes them more solid. We may the threat to the system, the stress on the system, may actually make the system stronger. Not in 2 years, not in 4 years, maybe not in 5 or 10, but going forward, it may actually make the system stronger to pursuing that, making the a more perfect union.
Yeah.
We've seen this in American history in the past. Each time we've had something like the Revolutionary War or the Civil War, even World War II and the Depression and some things like that, we have seen constitutional amendments
Yeah.
arise. We've seen major legislation to redesign how we do government and to create a more just society. I think we're going to see the same.
Yeah.
I think that that's where it's going to go. So I am disturbed. I am angered. I am occasionally very saddened about where I see the state of our country in terms of our government and our society. But I am not ultimately despairing or hopeless
Yeah.
by any stretch.
Yeah.
So I think I guess that's kind of went all over the place on that. So
That's
I
all right.
could. There's so many different policies that we could suggest. I mean, certain things like I think a constitutional amendment that says that no president has immunity from anything that they do in terms of their actions as president in the Constitution, and do that Supreme Court ruling. I think there are things that we can do in terms of voting rights. I think there's some of those basic core things, and so much of what Trump has done in these recent years, very, very little of it has been done through Congress. It's been
Yeah.
done through executive orders and people he put in place. And the assumption that just because he got rid of some of these things, now they're gone forever and will never be back. Another president walks in, can flip everything, the other direction if they want to,
Yeah.
which I think is one of the things we're going to look at going forward, is how to create a more stable uh, federal government, so that you don't have this kind of things with presidents doing executive orders to
Yeah.
upend things. So it's what makes us anxious and nervous is because we can't see how it ends.
Yep.
We can't see the final product, but I'm hopeful that we will have learned some things and made a more perfect union
Yeah.
after this. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking a while ago when Trump was referring to what he was doing and everything, a new gilded age, and he was, of course, referring back to the 1880s and 90s. And for
Yes.
those of us who know the Gilded Age,
Yes.
we
Oh,
know the
I'm
only people that benefited was the
send me
wealthy.
back. I can't wait.
Yeah, the wealthy and everything. And of course, the Gilded Age led to Teddy Roosevelt, and it
Exactly.
led to unions and, trust busting and all of that,
Labor laws. Yep.
labor laws. And so Trump's so-called Gilded Age may indeed lead to some reforms that have been necessary, that we human beings seem only to be willing to take desperate measures when we're desperate. Or,
Right.
I mean, we don't fix things when they're easily fixable.
Right.
We, for some reason, have to wait till it's a mess,
Yes. Right.
right? And then we say, "Oh boy, we better do something about this,"
That's right. That's
right?
right. That is what happens. Yeah.
Your comments about uh, laws and things like that. Again, the founders. I mean, I think about the Federalist Papers, Madison and Hamilton, and others who wrote the Federalist Papers, John Jay, and then even you get Washington and his recordings and others. I mean, they feared a despot.
Yeah.
They
Right.
feared, as they referred to it, as an unscrupulous man who
Yeah.
was only interested in profit,
Yeah.
because they understood that in order for what they were putting in place, this democracy, to work, it could only be done if the people running the show believed in it and abided by it and were willing to put the interests of the society, the country, ahead of their own interests, right? In other
Right.
words, I think I said this to you in a previous show on something. But I remember watching an interview. Some guy was interviewing Trump supporters and talking about, asking them the question about Trump, not being democratic, being anti-democratic, and how many of them were saying is, well, it's okay for the moment because our
Yeah.
democracy has gotten off track, and
Yeah.
once he puts it back on track, we need it. We need a dictator to put it back on track, and once he puts it back on track, we can go back to being a democracy again. And I
Yeah.
just want to
That's,
say, I want to say, how stupid are you?
yeah.
But I also wanted to say, this is not how democracy works.
No.
If you think your democracy has gone off track, then you vote for different people,
You form
and
coalitions and
and
get
you
your
form
part. Get your,
coalitions and you do
yeah.
all of that. And then, by the way, for democracy to work, you have, as much as it hurts, you have to be willing to lose.
Yes.
That's the way it works.
That's what
For
democracy
Donald
is.
Trump, what's the worst thing? To be a loser.
Right.
But in a democracy, you've got to be willing to say, well, the people obviously didn't want to pick us for
Yeah.
whatever reasons.
Right.
And so you have to have people who are going to play by the rules. And by the way, this involves a certain kind of character,
Right.
right? And then the other thing was, along with that, is John Adams spent a lot of time talking about being a nation of laws and not men.
Right.
And of
Yep.
course, what he meant by that was that it's the law that determined how we behaved, not the whims of the king.
Right.
Uh, so when Trump comes out and says at the beginning of his second term with Pam Bondi, saying that he and Bondi were the sole interpreters of the Constitution,
Yeah.
that kind
Right.
of,
Yeah.
that's the stuff of dictators. That's
Yeah.
the stuff
Of
of
course it
kings
is. Yeah.
when you say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the way this works is you have to have women and men of principle.
Yes. Right.
And if you don't have women and men in principle, doesn't matter what you got in place as far as the law goes.
Right. And I think that that's so. Just as an example, some of the things we're talking about, I think the pardon power of the president,
Yeah.
the ability to pardon people, I think it was assumed by the founders and assumed by for the past 250 years that presidents would use that responsibly.
Yeah.
And that if they didn't use it responsibly, it would create political blowback that they would be shamed and not be able to survive as a president if they did shameful things. We have a president for which shame means there is no such thing as shame.
Yeah.
So there's nothing. Everything is transactional. And so I think that one of the things that may come out of this, we'll see, possibly a constitutional amendment that limits the power of pardons.
Yeah.
Presidents not able to pardon themselves, not able to pardon members of their own family, not able to pardon members of their own administration or people that are uh, part of their political campaign, their campaign organization. Um, and maybe some constitutional law to do that. Will that occur? I don't know. But I
Right,
see that
right.
as this is the kind of thing where we've always sort of had a common agreement that decent people don't do these things. Well, we just had an indecent person
Yeah,
come in
yeah.
and who's
If you
not
got
going.
enough money, you can get your pardon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. And so now that creates the impetus for making a more perfect union, where
yeah,
instead of just having a quote gentleman's agreement, now it becomes codified that
yeah.
this is what everybody had assumed was always going to be the case. Now becomes codified
You
rather
know,
than
I also
agreement.
wonder, along with that, is if it, and I don't know that there'll be a big movement for it, but maybe there will be at some point to modify how the impeachment process goes,
Yeah.
because clearly the impeachment process is a political process and
Yes.
often a partisan process. We even saw that with Andrew Johnson, right?
Yeah. Right.
The first president to be impeached after Abraham Lincoln. I mean, he succeeded Lincoln after his assassination.
Right.
That was when you read the history of that. That was certainly very partisan.
Oh, sure it
That
was. Yeah.
maybe in the process, maybe try to put some things in place to help put some guardrails on the process to keep it from becoming political one way or another, right? I don't
Yeah.
know. I'm just thinking about it. I have a thought, and we'll run it by you here. I've been
Yeah.
pondering this a lot.
Okay.
We got an election coming up in November. Trump clearly is trying to put his finger on the scale to rig it, right? The Save
Right.
Act and all this stuff. You got the Republican Party in the state house in Columbus, my Ohio,
Yeah.
created this bill about that you if you vote by mail, you have to include a photo copy of your photo ID and all this
Yeah.
nonsense.
Yeah.
The Republicans in my state house have just gone goofy.
Yeah. Right.
Not a surprise. They're just goofy. Some actually, a couple of them I know personally.
Yeah.
They've gone goofy, and our Republican governor DeWine vetoed it.
Yeah.
So good for him, vetoed it.
Right.
But there's no doubt that they're going to be doing everything they can to
Sure.
undermine this vote because they know the more
Right.
people go out to vote, the less chance they have of winning.
Right.
My prediction is if somehow they're successful in manipulating this,
Yeah.
the American people are not going to stand for it.
No, they won't.
That
I don't.
there are enough people now who have, I mean, there's still, you've got the rabid Trump cult, as I call them, who,
Right.
you know, will, whatever Trump does, they'll find a way to support it. But
Right.
there's a lot of people who have left that movement.
Yeah.
And I just don't think the American people are going to sit down and take that.
No.
Uh, I don't know what that means, but
I
I
mean,
just don't think that they're going to just let Trump and the Republicans run over that.
yeah. I think that there are armies of lawyers and legal teams
Yeah.
who are monitoring. The problem is we don't know specifically what angle they might try to take
Right.
to undo things. So it's hard to speak in specifics as to what our response is going to be because we don't know what they're exactly which thing they're really going to try. Say
Yeah.
all sorts of things. Which ones will they pursue? We don't know.
Yeah.
But there are armies of legal teams, just massive teams with deep funding that are watching, that are fighting this.
Yeah.
There are Democratic organizations that have emerged over these last 18 months or so since Trump has been for organizing protests, for organizing rallies, if when things go awry. Yes, I think you're right. I think there will be a big uh, resistance, a big pushback. There
Yeah.
already is a resistance. There are
Yeah.
people fighting him at every turn, and largely successful to
Yeah.
this point. And I think we'll continue to be successful. I
Yeah.
could be wrong. We'll see, but that's and rightly so. Well, yeah, it's interesting. Who was the commentator I heard recently? I can't remember who it was. Said that in one sense, Trump doesn't care about the midterms in terms of who gets elected to Congress, whether he has a Republican or Democratic majority. He personally doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
What he cares about is he needs a base, even if it's a minority, he needs a base that supports him. And so he will continue to go with MAGA people that support him, even if that costs him a governing majority
Yeah.
in Congress.
Right.
Um, and I think and when he said that, and I heard him talk about that, reflect, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
And so it's unclear to me how much he's going to he talks a big talk. How much is he actually going to follow through on trying to do some of these things? Now,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that there aren't other people in his administration who might try to push things, or Stephen Miller and some of these other people who might try to work some uh, magic to try to change the election.
Yeah.
But I question, how much Trump really cares about
Yeah.
winning, other than the fact that he's going to get called a loser. But he'll find somebody to blame if the
Yep.
Democrats win. It won't be his fault. It'll
Yeah.
be somebody else's fault. And then he still has his MAGA base to support him, and so he's a happy camper.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't
Yeah.
know,
We'll see. We'll see. One thing for
but
sure, the 250th birthday is sure going to be has been a wild ride.
yeah, it sure is. And I think that's when we talk about this. I think my thing whenever as we're approaching the 250th birthday is um, we're still here.
Yep.
We're 250 years later. We're still here. We're in turmoil. Um, what we have built over these 250 years is under the greatest threat it's been in decades, and this is our moment. This
Yeah.
is our moment to pick up the baton, carry the dream forward, and to keep perfecting that union and make it a more perfect union.
Yeah.
And that's so what I'm saying. On the one hand, I don't think that Trump's likely going to be successful. On the other hand, I want to say, don't let down your guard.
Yep.
We've got to keep the pressure on, keep championing democracy, and keep involving ourselves with people and with organizations that are gonna realize that goal.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well, not only is the 250th year of our anniversary not uh, routine, um, certainly is interesting, but November through January is going to be a wild ride.
is it ever?
I
Yeah,
think that's clear.
yeah,
Whatever happens, it's going to be a wild ride. So, friends, sit down. Kenny Stabler, remember Kenny Stabler, little
yeah.
quarterback from the Raiders,
Was he the
backup
snake?
quarterback and kicker.
Yeah,
He was a hard living guy, and I read a story about him one time that he had a motorboat, a speedboat.
yeah.
He had it out there on Harvard and Oakland or wherever, and he had a in the passenger side of the boat he had a little plaque stuck right on the dash there, 6 words: get in, sit down, hang on. so, so
Yeah,
friends, get in, sit down, and hang on. It's going to be a wild ride. So
right. Indeed, indeed. Yeah.
as always, Michael, thank you for your insights. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
friends, this is Faith Seeking Understanding. I am Alan Bevere, and the patron saint of faith seeking understanding is Anselm of Canterbury, who said, I do not understand in order to believe, but I believe in order to understand. So, friends, keep seeking.